Alright everyone, so the Squid Game Season 3 has released on Netflix, and this is the final season of the show, where this is placing the stakes that are much higher. The games are much more deadlier, and where there's Gi-hun and the other players, they are in the risk and the biggest challenge of their lives as they survive one of the final games in the show. And even for what I'm about to say here, and plus, not only am I going to be giving you guys my thoughts on the entire season overall, but also breaking down the ending for why it was a dumb route to go where they wanted to go. But I have a lot to say here right now about the final season of Squid Game. And so, if you're new, then be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss on any future videos. But now, let's talk about Squid Game. And now, I'm gonna start off by saying that where we last left off season 2, like, things got unresolved. It's like they had like a big cliffhanger where things were much more intense, because especially with that ending involving Gi-hun tried to end the games, and especially involving pink soldiers and that massive attack. And even though that we had to wait 3 years for season 2, but then with the third season, that will be the final season of the show. And especially for how the second season ended, because I thought that with the third season that it would stick the landing and things would get resolved with Gi-hun, and that will finally be labeled like hero of the story. And just with the third season overall, and it continues right where it left off. Just for how like everything feels, knowing that things are such on high stakes, especially with Gi-hun for what he has to go through as player 456, and along with the other players, and just for how it opens and how it progresses, and especially with all the different plots and the storylines, especially involving the front man, the pink soldiers, what's really going on, for what are like the main reasons behind all this. I had a good time watching it, and even with the games that were introduced and some of the new ones, and even with the hide and seek game, even though I liked it, but even though it was so intense just to see that, and for the way that they were able to come up with like a new challenges for what the players had to face. And I don't know if this felt like a final season of the show, if what they're setting up next based on the series finales and ending, and even with the games that were introduced to end the show. And I kind of felt like things were getting quite interesting, and even with the characters that were still in the game, that are still with Gi-hun, with the backstory between our characters, what they have been through, and how are they going to survive the games. And even with the writing and character development, they stuck with it, and I think it pretty much went well. That type of experience to witness the final moments of the show, and even like by the time like everything starts to build up all the way to the penultimate episode, where things are in high stakes, and especially with the remaining players that were left, along with Gi-hun, for what the challenge really was, and especially for how it all sets up, and even with a confrontation between Gi-hun and the front man, and even for how Gi-hun has been like progressed as the main lead. And I gotta say, I think he was handled pretty good, and even from season 1 all the way up till the final season. And I had the most definite feeling that like I think like he was written pretty good, but not in a way that I thought his character would end up. But but some of the writing choices, everything had me on the edge of my seat all the way up till the series finale, and even with the finale episode, and I think it was good until it ended up being goofy. And now let's break down the ending to Squid Game. And now, with the whole purpose of this is, especially with Gi-hun, who is forced to compete in the games again, especially as he wants to put an end to it all, and even for how this whole season goes down, and even as it builds up towards the series finale, as we have the remaining players in the final game of the show, and that is from the triangle to the circle to the square. And especially as we have Gi-hun holding a newborn baby that is holding like a player 222, and that was originally belonged to Kim and Jong-hae, who sacrificed herself during the last moments of the jump rope game, and after she couldn't get across because of her sprained ankle. And then with Mei-jeon, who is player 333, with him and her, that is technically their child, and even with the newborn baby that takes her place as player 222. And even for how the final game goes, is that whichever players they eliminate, that is a minimum of 2 to 3 players, and they let the remaining players, either 1 or 2, win and receive the prize money. And now, especially for how all this goes down, and how it builds up to such an intensifying a final game, and to wrap up the show, is that we have like a Gi-hun, and with the most intense choice that he makes is to let him and the newborn baby live, and to have player 333 make the ultimate sacrifice, and to let Gi-hun survive, and to leave this place to have a happy ending with his newborn daughter, and to take her home well. And even with the remaining players that were eliminated, and that just led to maybe Mei-jeon, Gi-hun, and player 222, which is the newborn. And even that we see an ultimate final fight between these two, like whichever ones that they want to eliminate. Or even that we see Mei-jeon, who was attempted to drop the newborn baby, which I thought was so dumb, and that would have been so awful. But especially as like he makes the choice not to. But even just with the final moments of this like final game is like so intense, and especially with Gi-hun, like he lets Mei-jeon, aka player 333, die. And then especially with Gi-hun, and even for what he does, is that I thought he was gonna put an end to the game, and to get the prize money, and then to essentially leave that place. But he ends up making the ultimate sacrifice. He says the final line that humans are, and then he falls backwards, and then he makes the ultimate sacrifice, and especially with everyone that watches him. And I thought after everything that has been built up, because I was really rooting for the story with Gi-hun to become the hero, and to ultimately end the games for good, and to essentially like the story of the games from existence, it turned out to be like, yeah, very dumb way to end his character, because I thought he was gonna get like a happy ending. But it turns out that with player 222, that becomes the winner, and she wins the prize money. And especially the pink soldiers, that they evacuate the place and to blow it up, and we see the front man looking at Gi-hun as he makes the ultimate sacrifice, and then he takes the newborn baby, take her to Hangzhou for where like she could lend him like the prize money. And that's what we see here. And now, especially with the epilogue that takes place 6 months later, and with every character getting their send-off, I thought this was pretty good, and I just liked everyone just like getting their ending. But especially with Hwang Jin-ho, that ends up getting back to where he finds player 222, that is the baby, who essentially wins the prize money, and he wins like $45 billion, and like wow. And I thought that was insane, but I think that's pretty good. And now, how like the final minutes of the show go down is that we are in like Los Angeles, and we see Gi-hun's daughter, and essentially that this was the daughter that he abandoned at the end of season 1, and we get to revisit that again in the series finale. And with the front man that shows up at her door to give her the remaining possession of her father to her, and that is his jacket that's labeled Player 456, which I thought was nice, I guess. I felt like this was kind of like dumb and it's sort of like a goofy way to end it off like this, because especially with Gi-hun, who did not have a happy ending with his daughter, it turns out it was goofy. But especially with the final scene of the show, which I thought was the most absurd way, and it was just one of the worst ending of all time, and that's with the frontman that drove past an alley, and then we get a cameo from Cate Blanchett, and now it's teasing like an American version of Squid Game, I suppose. But I think for what this ending is teasing, like the expansion of Squid Game, that they're expanding it to even further to label it a cinematic universe. But after we spent all this time building up to seasons 2 and 3, but I'm guessing like with this show, it had the worst ending of all time. But I think the writers can do better. But hey, I liked what the final season delivered. It gave us some great intensity and good character development, and with the games that were more deadlier, and even with the deaths that happened. But in either ways, and it just ended off like in an unresolved worst ending I've ever seen for a Netflix show. But I want to say with my final thoughts on this entire show in general, and I believe I liked season 1 the most, that became a phenomenon with Gi-hun that competed in the games, and especially throughout all the times that we experienced with the show, as he is experiencing more of the games and the people behind it, and with all the characters for what they had to put through, for what their backstory is, for how they landed in this position to even win the prize money, for what they have to compete for, and lives are at stake for what it's gonna cost them. But it turns out, but towards the end, it was a laughable, it was dumb. Yeah, I think it's an ending I'll never look back on, but it kind of felt like it left a sour taste in my mouth. But just to include like a lazy cameo from Cate Blanchett, and I think that's the way I would put it. But yeah, I think that sums up my thoughts. But hey, at least that's the ending of the show. But if they ever do get an American Squid Game, but I'll see what it turns out to be. But hey, it is what it is. But that's gonna do it for this video. Just let me know in the comments down below, and what your thoughts on the final season of Squid Game in season 3, and what your thoughts, especially on the ending and the final moments of that show, if you thought it was good. But just let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the notification bell for future videos, and also follow all my social medias, all linked down below. And with that, I'll see y'all next video. Peace.